So introductions, I'm Kevin Loverdier with Geometronics. I'm the lead operations surveyor. And today, this is a no frills sort of webinar. I didn't make a PowerPoint. I didn't see the need to make a PowerPoint. And let's face it, I've put way too much time into this code list and I didn't have time to make a PowerPoint. So we've got a couple of topics. Originally, I was going to be just focusing on the code list and how it works in both Captivate and Infinity. But earlier this week, a good topic came up and I wanted to get word out to everybody. So thank you for those that are here. What I'm going to start with and show, if you could pass this word around to others in your office so that everybody's aware of this, that would be a really good start. And what that is we have discovered a problem with ORD and what happens when there is a shared cell definition. Now, I'm starting with an example drawing here. You can see we've got some calc points in here. We've got some monuments. But if I go over here, there's a lot more monuments. You know, there's another 6 monument files that aren't showing up. So we go, okay, well, why aren't my monuments showing up? And I guess I should start this with, these are the symptoms to look for. If your drawing is doing this, then you probably have this problem going on. Now I switch my filter. You know, all my levels are on. So why are my monuments? Why are some of them showing up? I mean, here, okay, I'm getting 1, but I know from the rest of this, there should be more in here. And let's use our element selection tool. We can say, okay, select everything on the found mon level. Well, there's 153 monuments. You know, I've got what, maybe 25 right there? Where are the others? So here's the problem. If we go in and we look at our properties and we pick one of these, it's going to tell us our cell name is null share. Now, right here, it says shared cell found mon. But up here, it says null share. Now, what's different about, say, 1120 here, if I can get to it, notice the cell name is found mon, and it's a circle. What has happened is this active ORD drawing had an existing survey drawing referenced into it, an old survey drawing, a retracement drawing that was built with V8i. And this is the glitch. This is the problem. It is not consistent as to when this happens. And the reason that these ones are displaying is because I re-imported the data. Now I tried to replicate this again, and if I imported data, they would disappear. So we don't know what the exact key is, but we know that it happens. And in that old DGN, that found monument cell is placed as a shared cell. And the part that infects, and it shouldn't do this because when MicroStation looks at a reference drawing, it shouldn't bring anything from the reference into the real drawing unless you say, you know, merge into master, copy. But for whatever reason, MicroStation sees that shared cell, and shared cells wreak havoc with ORD in this new version of Connect. It's just easiest to avoid them. And what has happened is, remember, our survey data here is actually based around that cell. Remember, if we delete that cell, then the survey data gets deleted. So if we look in here, and if I pull up my details, I have survey data for all of those found monuments. The codes are correct. The information's correct. They should display. What has happened is when that reference, whatever this infection is, came in, it redefined those cells and gave them that null share value. And now the survey part of ORD cannot display the cell, which means it does not display the identifiers, the decorators. So they're all in here. And one of the peculiar things about this is, if I say annotate my model, notice all of the annotations come, all of the point numbers come up. And not only is it the found monuments, but it's also control points, network points. So I kind of thought this was peculiar. And then I got to think about it. I'm like, well, the annotation is actually working off of the survey data. And the survey data is trying to display, it just can't find that symbol, that cell of found monument in a clean version. And so it doesn't have a chance to display it. So now that we've talked about what the problem is, how it kind of manifests, what you need to remember is, if you're going to use any references into your new work that are from our old V8i products, you will need to clean the shared cells out of that V8i drawing. And because we don't want to modify a drawing that's already archived or record, because that's what we filed with the county, you'll want to take a copy of that drawing. And real quickly, I'll show you what we can do. So here's the reference drawing in question. Oh, first things first, remember, most of those are put in the server as read-only. I always forget to do this. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to change the properties on that. And actually, let's change the name. Oops. And put that in a working folder on the server or on your local, however you need to work with it. So what we can do is we can use the element selection tool. And we can scroll down until we get to shared cell. And notice it's going to select 38. It tells me I have 38 shared cells. And where you're going to find them is in a specific version of this legend. And we do not use shared cells in our cell definitions or libraries anymore. And all of this has been fixed for how it works in Connect and ORD. But I believe this legend at some point in the past was defined with this shared cell in it. And, you know, the other version, it could still cause problems, but usually we didn't see it. So it just got left in there. Well, it causes problems for us now. So if that shared cell is only in these legends, real simple, select them with your element selection tool, delete them. But that's not gotten rid of them completely. We have to do 2 more steps. Now, what if those shared cells were also in the data? Notice here that the cells that were used in the map are actually called ProPin underbar F. That's an older version of our monument cells. If they're actually used in the data, then what you need to do is actually go in, place a new unshared version of that cell on top, and then delete the shared versions. Now, to complete the cleanup in the drawing, we need to get into our cell library. I like to get there by simply selecting Place Active Cell and then hitting the Browse Cells. And then the first thing you need to do is you need to say Detach. And now clear out your cell library. And this button, toggle, whatever you want to call it here, says Show Shared Cells. And there are all of the shared cells that exist in this drawing because we detached the library. So these are what are in the drawing. So if I select the top one, hold Shift, select the bottom one, I can delete them all. Now we're done with the cells. I can close that. Also, if you do place cells, be very watchful. You know, if you're doing it manually, not using the ribbon, that you don't have that box checked on. And then the last step that you have to do is actually compress the drawing. So I have that on my shortcut menu up here, or we can go to the Backstage, Tools, Compress File. But what did it compress? Well, what you actually need to show is Compress Options. And this is where you can select or deselect everything. But basically, you want to select all of the cell headers, unused cells. Essentially, I just compress everything, say compress. Now your drawing should be clean. If I go down here and I select shared cell again, notice nothing comes up in the selection box. So now this drawing is safe to reference into your working new active ORD Connect space. The last thing I'll show is, let's go back to our working drawing. Now, ideally, you want to fix that drawing before you reference it, because once you've referenced that drawing in and these cells have become infected, for lack of a better word, the safest way to fix it is to throw all of this away and start a new drawing, because then you're going to have all clean cells. You're not going to have any corruption of those cells. We're not going to have any odd effects. But in the off case where you're so deep in and you don't want to redo all that work, at the bare minimum, what you need to do is you will need to delete all of the imports that you have. And you can either go back to the original CSV files, or if you have clean SQLite save files of your survey field books, you can go back to those. But we're going to delete all of them. And then we're basically going to do the same thing. Let's delete this file too. And then we're going to do the same thing that we did with the V8i drawing. We're going to come down to shared cell. We have no shared cells in the drawing. Good. We're going to open up Make sure everything's detached. So we have no shared cell definitions in here now. And then we're going to compress the drawing. And at this point, you should be able to bring that data back in. But like I said, if this happens and you're not too far along, the safest thing is to start a fresh drawing from the seed and just bring your data back in. Any questions about that before we move on to the next thing? Let's start with infinity. And let's talk about our code tables. I know several of you have been waiting for this. I think I have everything ironed out. So let's talk about what the new code table is going to be. Right now, the code table name is ODOT Code 2021. And I think this is the naming structure that we're going to stick with. That way, when we make updates, we can update the year on it. And I think I'll kind of follow the path of geoids. And if we in 2022 make another update, then it's going to be, you know, A, B, C. And that way we can just keep moving forward and have a good idea of where, you know, which code table was active when we did something. Now, in a week or two, I'll make sure and send an email out to everybody. We'll post these files to everyone. What you're going to need to do is you're going to need to create this code table in the backstage of your Infinity. So what you need to do that, you're going to need the LICT file. So we'll be shipping that or putting it on the server in a place where you can get it. You're going to take a copy of that, put it on your local, and then you're going to come up here to import, and you're going to go tell Infinity where you can find that code list. You grab it, you import it, and then you're going to get a code list for ODOT Code 2021. And any project that you want to use the new codes with, you have to attach that code table to. So when I go to new project, my default template still says ODOT codes. So I need to either change my default template, or every time I start a new project, I need to remember to go change the code here. One of the things that we decided to add, and I'll open this code table so you can see it, are groups. I don't know how many people have looked at Infinity, but normally when you get in there and you look at our existing ODOT code table, it just says topo points and lines. So the groups aren't that big of a deal to Infinity, but the reason that I've added them is on the instrument, the users can choose to filter their view by groups. So if you wanted to, and you're only working on utilities, you can actually tell the controller to only show you the codes from the utilities group. So it would be a way, if they need to, they could speed up their search for codes if they're not familiar with the code list. And like I said, for Infinity or for somebody that's used to the code list, if all of the groups are active, then you see them all. It doesn't make any difference. But the idea behind the groups is trying to put codes together that are for similar function. I didn't want to go crazy with the groups. So, you know, easy ones, drainage. So drainage, we've got, you know, all of the different pipes, ordinary high water, inlets. I'm going to skip over roadway general. Of course, survey. We have all of our control and found monuments. Terrain vegetation is pretty self-explanatory. Obviously, utility lines. So poles, lines, meters, all of that stuff should be set up. Now, roadway general is kind of the catch-all. So we have the roadway stuff like edges of pavement, guardrails, buildings, but we also have structure stuff, bridges, retaining walls, MSE walls. We also have sprinkler pivots, monitoring wells. Up there at the top was borehole. So basically, roadway general is a lot of our mapping features. And then the other specialties are there. Now, all of the point codes that have symbols in MicroStation, the symbols should be coming into Infinity. The symbols do not carry across in Captivate, so we will not see those in the field. But what does carry across into the field are the colors of the lines and the basic line styles. So on the field controller, we will see some of those, and they should look similar to what's coming up in Infinity. Oh, and I guess I should say, this code list is a little longer than our previous code list. All of the codes and settings that we had to set for the ORD feature styles, I've added every one of the codes in here. So one of the ones that's kind of always been available on the drafting menu or the ribbon now are, like the guardrail end terminals. Guardrail left, guardrail right. I don't know if we actually will need to shoot those in the field or if we want to start shooting them in the field. But we had to add those so that when we cloud map in ORD, everything comes into the field book when we do that export or that import from graphics routine. They needed a field code for ORD, so I included it in this code list. So it's all there. I don't know if every one of those will actually be shown on the code card, but they are in the active code list that will be on the instrument, and then also, basically the same code list in Infinity. Any questions up to this point on how this code list is set up, what's working with it? Okay, good. I've got you riveted.
Hey, Kevin, I have a question.
No.
You've got it divided into groups there. Do you have to look at it in groups like that, or can it be all just one big list?
In Infinity, you have to look at it in groups. But on the instrument, you do not. So in Infinity, I can only see one group at a time on my screen. Notice if I go to the top, then all I get's a listing of the groups themselves. But that's okay, because you're usually not looking at the code list in Infinity. So to make this a little more meaningful, let's look at it in the controller now. Or in this case, I have, and I'm assuming everybody can see the Leica instrument simulator here running on the desktop. I'm going to start a new job. Well, actually, no. Let me back up. Let's talk about what you have to do once we give you the new code list files. First thing is, you have to have the code list files. And like I said, we're going to send you a link to where we're going to keep those code list files. And it'll say Captivate code list or DBX code list. On the instrument or the controller's SD card, you'll need to copy those files to the code folder. Notice here for my simulator, I'm in the SD code. I've got a lot of different code lists in here. And what I have is there's the new one, ODOT Code 2021. So it's in my SD card. But remember, you cannot use it on the instrument or the controller until it's in active memory. So to do that, we go to Settings, Tools, Transfer User Objects. We want a code list. Actually, go back one step, because before you can pick the code list, you actually have to say where you're going to go get it. I want it from the SD card, and I'm going to move it to internal memory. Now it's going to look at the code lists that are in my SD card, and I can see this one created by Geometronics. I say OK. I say OK. So now my code list is available. So let's start a new job. Call it Web Demo. Now, because I'm just in my desktop with the total station simulator, I'm going to set the coordinate system to none. Notice, because I've already done this before, it's going to default to that code list. And remember, this code list is only valid for data that's going to be processed in ORD. It doesn't have all of the codes that En-ROADS understands. So if you do have a crew that's going to be doing some data collection for a job that we've kept in En-ROADS, they'll need to remember to go back to the Alpha 18 code card. I can do a store. And now what I'm going to do real quick is I'm going to import some ASCII data. I'm going to check my settings. Make sure it skips the first row. And I'm going to make sure it's going to my correct job. And now you can see we have 4 control points in this job. So to pretend that we're going to take some data and actually show you how these codes work, I have to pretend like we've actually set this instrument up. And you notice I'm in metric units here. And that's because the data input screen on this simulator is metric, because it came from Switzerland. I'm going to set my angle to 0. I'm going to apply. I'm going to shoot a distance. This can tell me I'm 3 meters out, because I told it I was 80 meters and I really need to be 83.45. I'm going to shoot another distance. There we go. No, I don't want a picture. Now I can go to measure. So for the first one, let's do 20 degrees. And let's put it out there at 25 meters. There you can see we're in there. So if we hit the search, we get a drop down. Now, this is something that I always forget about is, oh, I'm in here. I'm going to start typing. Let's say I want TC. Well, I know TC's there, tree coniferous. It's there. It's got to be there. Oh, I forgot. You got to take the none out. Or we say TC. Why isn't it working now? Because it's not on caps. Okay, so tree coniferous. Great. Let's shoot tree coniferous. So our first point stored. Let's move over a little bit. Shoot a distance. Now, one of the things that this has that we were all waiting for is attributes. And you say, how do we get to the attributes? What about it? This little sheet of paper here is your attributes. And if a code has attributes defined, if you click on that sheet of paper, you'll see what your attributes are and what you can enter for a value. So since this tree is already coniferous, the only attribute we can enter is diameter in inches. So I say, okay. Now notice it has little lines on the sheet of paper saying there's actually a value in there for the attribute. Now, if I measure, we've stored that point. Those attributes are still there. So if we go to 30 degrees, do the same thing. We go look at that point. It retained that attribute value. So that's something good, because if you have several that are the same, you can just keep them going. But it's also a downfall, because if you're not paying attention, then you might not change that value. So that is something you're going to have to watch for. Now, annotations are still available. Those are the notes, remember. So if, let's say this last tree was 24 inches, but it was a double 24, I can put that into the note and I can store it. I've updated that record. Now let's go look at the first shot. Remember the first shot, I didn't put that attribute value in. I forgot to. Or I intentionally just took the shot because I needed to get the shot. You can always come back in and enter the attribute value. Store. Now that attribute is in the data. So that is an older code. And that's why the attributes are not mandatory. Because if we want to take data and the crew is not comfortable with using the attributes yet, they can still use those older codes. Now let's go a little further to the right and let's use a new code. Tree. And if, well, I guess now, oh, there it goes. Tree with attributes. So I'm going to take a measurement. Notice it says attribute is mandatory. If I say okay here, it will not let me store the point. I cannot move past this without identifying the attributes. And that is because this is a new code that ORD is going to use to select the proper cell. We need to put in the diameter, and then ORD can also scale that cell. And so that's where the drip line in feet comes in. And let's just say we have a 12-foot drip line. Okay. I can't remember. Well, let's test it. So because it's mandatory, it comes up. It doesn't just take what's in there. And now, here's what's real nice. It leaves in what you've already entered. So if you're doing the same thing, you don't have to go put back in a bunch of stuff. But let's say I'm doing an ornamental. It's 6 inches with a 5-foot drip line. So those are mandatory attributes. Let's go a little bit more to the right. And let's do, we find something weird out here. Let's do a generic point. Generic point has a mandatory attribute. found bold. So this was a request, and I agree. Sometimes when you're the analyst in the office or the surveyor and you get a generic point that was shot and they didn't write anything about it in the book, that does not help us. So now to use this code, they actually have to give us some sort of a description. Let's do a fence. So a fence now has, and it's going to ask for a real value. So you can put in, oh, it's a 6.5 foot fence. And it has a choice list. What kind of a fence is it? Well, let's say chain link. I say, okay, measure. Measure. And now those attributes go with those points. And what will happen is when that data comes into ORD, those attributes will also go with the fence line that's drawn. And then let's go 98 degrees. I can zoom in a little bit on that so we can see the line. I don't know if we'll ever be able to draw a fence line with the X's in Captivate, but I am trying to get that to work in Infinity. It's supposed to be able to do it, but we haven't been able to get it done yet. So instead, what I have is I've changed it to a little different color because we get a sea of green when we're out there. So I've tried to give things a little bit different color. I've given it a different line style so that it kind of stands out. And you can see if we want, we can select that. We can see what the settings are for it. We can see which points are built into it. All of it's right there at our fingertips. Actually, now might be a good time rather than doing a bunch of demonstration. Let's go talk about which codes have attributes so that you can tell what's going on. You can be ready for them. And so this is what we'll be developing in the next few weeks. We'll perfect this list and get it into a format so we can, get it down to field book size so that the crews can have it. But as it stands right now, this is our list of point features with attributes. And if it has an asterisk, that means that that is a mandatory attribute. So a borehole, you're going to have to put the ID in for that borehole. We already showed tree. Those are mandatory because those features are going to be used in ORD, those attributes. Most of the utilities have kind of a similar setup, put stuff in owner and then the ID, if there is an ID. Obviously for found monuments, it'd be nice to have some descriptions. So those are options. And then if we look at lines, so here are the lines that have been set up. Obviously, a pipe general, that is mandatory attributes because you can select the type of pipe. Showed you the fences, retaining walls, height and description. TAA is another new code, traffic arrow all. And that's the other one that has some special functions in ORD. It's going to do the same thing. Your pick list is going to tell you what type of arrow it is, and then it's going to take a rotation azimuth. And then that's going to rotate the symbol in the DGN. Oh, code groups, how to sort those on the instrument.
Hey, Kevin.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just wonder, are we limited by characters in these descriptions?
I do not know. I don't want to say 255, but I also know that it's more than 10. So hopefully,
Okay.
I mean, I'm assuming that somebody will find that out. Or you know what? Because I've assigned Matt and Kurt to help me test this in actual equipment rather than just on my computer screen here. I'll tell Kurt to make a sticky note of that so he can go in there and put a bunch of gobbledygook characters in and see if it ever stops.
Okay. And
Thank
then
you.
all this carries through, correct?
Yes.
So no worries, and you don't have to do anything in Infinity. It'll pass right through the survey data to ORD, right?
Correct. And so that was the last thing that I'm going to show after we're done kind of using the simulator here is I'll take this file that we have and I'll bring it back into Infinity so you can see how it looks in Infinity.
Okay, thanks.
So
you might need to update your export template in Infinity.
yes. Well, I won't because I've done it, but yes, you guys might. And I do have a note for that. So we'll talk about that real quick too. But I'm down to 10 minutes. So I better hurry up, right? So if you want to see a different set of codes, you don't want to see all of the code list. So I'm in the actual active job. I mean, I'm in measure. If I go to define code, function, group, now I have my code groups. So now I can turn off all of those others and just show my survey codes. I say, okay. I say, okay. Now my search list only shows those code groups or that one code group. So I can do it, on the fly here and in the job setup. So if I go into job properties and I go to my code list tab, codes, function, group, or let's say we want to do utility codes now. I say, okay. Now it's going to show me all my utility codes. I say, okay. I say store. And when I go back to measure, now my utility codes are in there. So that's how that can be used on the instrument.
Actually seems like a good way to mess with your field crew.
It could.
Is there an example of what purpose that would be? For the
To mess with them?
Besides that.
Well, I mean, for you, Sean, it would be if you wanted to mess with somebody. Yeah. Like I said, I added it to see if it would be helpful. You've got a crew out there and all they're doing is tying utility marks. Maybe they want to limit their code list to just the utilities. It's just an idea. Yeah, I think I've shown you a smattering of the attributes. Obviously, it's easier to work with them once you get started. So I'm going to go back here. I'm going to close this now so that we can actually go use the job data. So I'm in my DBX folder for my SD card. There's my web demo job. So I'm going to copy it. I'm going to put it over here in my working directory so they're all in the same place. And now let's go back to Infinity. We're going to go to a new project. I'm going to say create. So we're going to import web demo. Going to import all of that. And we're going to go in here, turn off the observation line so we can actually see it. Now, this is one of the new features that they've added to Infinity. So remember these three guys, those are our TC codes. And you can't see the full attribute here, but if you hit the pencil, you can see our attributes. So those come in with our regular tree coniferous symbol. Now remember, these two guys over here are the ones that I shot with the new code, tree. And you may ask, why is one bigger than the other? Leica did actually add the ability to scale the block based on an attribute. So these tree symbols are taking on the sizes of about what they'll show up in ORD. So with that attribute, we can actually use it with Infinity. Now, the part that I don't know that Infinity handles yet is the ability to use the species to choose the block. And so that's why this is a custom block that has kind of a representation of all three species in it. If I select the generic point, our description is there. Oh, and then if I select, I think it was this third one here. That we have the attributes and we actually have the annotations or notes. So those both came through. So now let's talk about the export. So we're going to take it to an ASCII. So in this template, you're going to find something, or I should say, this template is going to be similar to what I plan to produce. When we release this code list, I will also release it with an ASCII template that you can import so you don't have to go do these settings. And what's key about this template is it is going to save it as a CSV file. And that's critical because we've got ORD set. When you import a .csv file through the survey field book, the only one that's in there is our ODOT template. So it will automatically choose the right template and bring all the data in properly. And that means it includes a header row. It's comma delimited. And it's got our normal, point, northern, easting, ortho, code. Oh, but it missed the special code there. Okay, I'm gonna have to figure out why it did that. And then because we have an option for up to 4 fields or 4 notes, it's going to export those annotations as notes. And then it's going to export the attribute names and attribute values. And notice we have species conifer, diameter inch, the 2 tree values, have all of those. And our control point here, because normally the code network comes with a description attribute, it's going to be blank. That's okay. ORD ignores it. If there's no value in your attribute, it just doesn't import anything. Yeah, I don't have this one set up quite right. There we go.
Kevin, you normally sort by feature.
That's why I didn't do it. There we go. Thanks, Sean. So yeah, oh, see, and I did that. I called it points. That was something special that I built. So my bad for selecting the wrong thing. Yes, this is the correct one. Code still does it as CSV, but everything's set properly. So I export it. And so this will be the format. Actually, I'm out of time and I wasn't planning on doing this, but since I still have ORD up for grins. Okay, ask questions now while I finish this up, because I know you want to see it happen, right? Just dying to see it happen in the end. Jonathan, you have a question.
That was a while ago, but I forgot what it was exactly. I was maybe wanting a demo of the TAA just to show how that rotates the azimuth is put in there and it rotates it in ORD just to kind of show that. But and the different types of arrows that are in there.
Yeah, just a second here. New file. Didn't want that. Wanted this. Want that. Open. So a demo of TAA. Attributes from the field. Notes, not all points. Let's bring the simulator up again so we can see it on screen. And I'll shortcut this so that you can actually see it come in. All right. Apply, measure. So traffic arrow all. You have a pick list. So you have left arrow, right arrow, straight, left and right, left and straight, right and straight, left, right, straight. What I think is the old all code. Bike lane, so just the bike, and then you have bike with a straight arrow. So let's do left and straight. And let's say our orientation azimuth is 82 degrees. We say okay. So now we've got a point in there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to cheat. I'm going to come over here to my CSV file. And I'm just going to put in actually, I know what I can do. Instead of the generic point, let's put in the TAA and type is LT-STR. Isn't that what I said? Yes. Comma, ROTAZ equals 82.
You misspelled type there.
Oh, yep. Thank you. Yay, it worked this time. So now if we hover over that tree, you can see in the description line, it says double 24. So that's our annotation, our note. And then for the attributes pair, it says conifer 24-inch. Here we have the deciduous that we picked. And then we have the ornamental. And both of those are scaled. And then this guy is our left straight arrow rotated to 82 degrees. And this is the part where, if we hover over the point, we see that the attribute of the point is 6.5 foot chain length. And because of the import in ORD, the attributes get transferred to the line string also. So the line itself, the feature, has an attribute pair of 6.5 feet chain length. And then the last thing we can do is if I annotate the model, and turn off the decorators. So there you can see the fence is labeled. The trees have labeled. And I think that needs a little bit of work. It's a little hard to connect that with this tree, but that's the idea, is just with one quick swoop, the attributes end up creating information. Because, obviously if somebody is using our drawing and they don't have ORD, they can't hover and get this information. So if we put it in the attributes, then we can make an annotation label very quickly. All right. Well, I've taken more than my hour of time. I'll call for any last questions. Nothing? All right. Well, we'll call it a day, folks.
Thanks, Kevin.
Hey, thanks for showing up, guys.